If you're looking for an overall review along with some sample video and photos and my general thoughts on the Nikon D5600, stay tuned. This video is for you. I've answered many questions about the Nikon D5000 series over the last year or two, and many of you want to know if it's a worthwhile upgrade to the 3400 or the 3000 series. So I got my hands on the Nikon D5600 and I thought this would be a good time to do a review. Now I want to level set with you. I'm outside, it's about 40 degrees and we have a lot of sun. It's mid-afternoon and I think this will be a great time to grab some good, bright afternoon shots with this camera. I also want you to understand that this is a general overview. Now I might create some additional videos on how to do specific things with this camera, but I really want to put this camera through the test and share these results with you. Now like I do with my other videos, I've taken a handful of notes right here. So I may look away from the camera occasionally while I reference these notes because I want to be sure I don't miss anything. Now it's a little windy out here and we have some planes flying overhead, so just be advised if you catch some of that in the audio. Now here's the game plan. We're going to start off by identifying some key features with this camera. Now these are features that I feel are relatively important to mention. And then I'm going to give you my initial thoughts on the camera after having used it for a few weeks. Then we're going to jump right into the field test. Now in that field test, I'm going to do a little sample video and audio using the built-in microphone on this camera. Then we're going to jump into taking a lot of photos. Now I'm going to try to grab some photos outside and maybe indoors and at night because we really want to put it to the test. Now when I take these photos, I want you to understand, take a look in the upper left-hand corner and you'll see the metadata. I try to show that to you because I want you to know the settings that I used on this camera to grab some of those images. So that way, if you have this camera, you can replicate them yourself if you want. When we're done with the field test, I'm going to give you a few final thoughts. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into some of the key specifications that I feel are important with this camera. This camera is rated at 820 shots on a full battery. Now when you compare this to the Nikon D3400, that camera is rated at 1200. So it just means that this is consuming a little more energy, which is not a big deal in my opinion. 820 is still plenty, and if you want some more, just ensure you have an extra battery. Not a big deal. This camera also has a fully articulating touchscreen. Now this can face all the way forward, it can also tilt up, and it can tilt down. It's a nice little feature to have. It has 39 autofocus points on it, 9 of which are cross type. Now what's important about the autofocus points? Now the Nikon D3400 has 9, but if you're tracking a moving subject that comes across the frame, up, down, left, right, however you want it, the more focal points you have, the better the chance of the camera tracking that subject and locking focus, so it makes it really nice. Now this camera also has a built-in external mic port. It's right here on the side. Now many of you have asked this question, what's that all about? Why would you use it? Well, if you shoot video with this camera, having an external mic port means that you can have better audio quality as opposed to just using the built-in microphone on the camera. It allows you to connect an external microphone to it. So it's a nice feature to have. Now this camera also has built-in time-lapse capabilities. Now I've done some recent videos on doing time-lapse with Nikon and Canon cameras, and because this has built-in capabilities, it can actually render the time-lapse in the body itself. This means that you do not need something like Adobe Premiere to pull that off, so it's really nice to have that feature in here. This camera also supports ultra high-speed cards. Now that's nice if you're doing a lot of continuous shooting and you need some fast writing back to the cards. Now this camera also has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and NFC. Now if you're not sure what that's all about, don't worry. I may create some additional videos on those topics, but just know that NFC is something like near-field communication, and you'll see this in Android devices, and basically when two devices come close to each other, they can actually communicate back and forth, so it's kind of nice to have that. Now it has virtually the same physical size as the D3400, although this is just a little bit heavier, but it's not that noticeable in my opinion. Now it shares the exact same sensor and the 24 megapixel resolution as the Nikon D3400. Now Nikon also removed the AA filter. Many of you have asked this question, what is the AA filter? That's the anti-aliasing filter. It's also known as a low-pass filter. It tends to soften resulting images. Many photographers like to see this removed, so hats off to Nikon for removing it from this camera. Now this has an ISO range from 100 to 25,600. I don't know that you'd ever really need to get to 25,600, but you have the ability just in case you need to get there. It'll shoot 5 frames continuous mode, which isn't bad. I've seen some a little faster, but that's kind of middle of the road for this type of camera. And one last notable is that this camera is not environmentally sealed. Now I want to touch on this for just a minute. Now I've shot with a lot of cameras over the years, some of which have been environmentally sealed, like the 7000 series, and some which have not, like the 3000 series and the 5000 series. So what is environmentally sealed? That's really where the manufacturer places gaskets between certain components of the camera to help keep the elements out. Now, is it a marketing gimmick? I don't know. I mean, I think it helps to some extent, but I would not have any issues in using a not environmentally sealed camera in relatively light rain. And keeping in mind that if you do have a camera that is environmentally sealed, it doesn't mean it's waterproof. You don't want to dunk it, you don't want to abuse it in the elements, but it might help to have some of that. So, with that said, let's go ahead and jump into my initial impressions. After using this camera for a few weeks, I'm going to give you just a few initial thoughts on it. Now, this camera feels good in the hands. I have some pretty big hands, and it seems to wrap around nicely on this camera, makes it easy to hold. Now I want to talk about one of the big features of the 5000 series, and more specifically, I think it's the 5300 and newer, is that this screen right here. So this screen articulates up, down, and it flips forward, and it's also a touch screen. So I've been using this quite a bit, and some of the things I like about this, well, this flips all the way forward, so if you want to do any kind of self-composition, it makes it really easy. Now it also will tilt up and down. Now what's nice about this? Well, if you're taking a shot that's close to the ground, you can hold the camera down, flip your screen so that you can see it, and that way you don't have to lay on the ground to capture that shot or to get a better view of it. And likewise, if I want to tilt it down like this, I can hold the shot above my head if I'm going to grab a crowd shot, that kind of thing. Makes it nice. Now, if the camera's going to get beat around, the other thing I like is that I can fold the screen inside towards the body. So that means the hard shell is on the outside, and I don't have to worry about this getting scratched up at all. Now I can also flip this back the way it is, just like most other cameras, like the D3400, for example. Now the screen's facing me on the back side, so I can quickly do an image preview and things like that. So that's what I really like about this camera, and it also seems to be very responsive. Now, when it comes to the touch screen, the pinch and the zoom and the menus, it's very similar to using a smartphone, for example. I've had no issues with it, and I really enjoyed it. So, with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at setting up for just a quick sample video and audio. To demo the video capabilities, I've grabbed my Joby DSLR pod right here. I'll post a link as to where you can get this. I've showcased this in other videos. I really like it. It's just a short little mini tripod that works well for me. So I'm going to go ahead and screw this on the camera here. And it does have a mounting plate, but I'm just going to leave it on there because I find this to be just as quick. Okay, so now I've got this attached right here. I'm going to go ahead and take my lens cap off because, well, we kind of need to do that, don't we? Go ahead and extend the lens. And I'm going to go ahead and take the screen on the back, and I'm going to move this forward and around. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And at this point, there's a live view switch. It's right here next to the dial on top of the camera. I'm going to go ahead and flip this on. And now it's active. And this may not be the best backdrop behind me, but I'm going to walk around here and I'm going to go ahead and record this, and I'm going to flip over and I'm going to show you what the video looks like, and then you can also get a sampling of the audio as well. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, I've activated the recording. Let's go ahead and switch over. This should provide a good sample video and audio taken from this camera. Now I did tuck away behind this silo that's behind me or to the side of me, and it's only because it was a little breezy out here, and this is my second or third take, and I was really kind of surprised about how much wind noise was really picked up on the built-in microphone. Now that might be the reason to have an external mic port so that you can use a better microphone. But nonetheless, I'm not going to do anything to enhance this audio, so you're going to hear it just as the camera has captured it. But again, I am trying to stay out of the breeze, so I suspect you're going to hear some of the breeze, but maybe not as bad as it would be had I been walking around. Now, as we step into this field test, I want you to know that I am going to be shooting in RAW, and I'll be in aperture priority, and I'm going to do my best to keep the ISO low, but I am going to intentionally turn that up as it gets dark outside and shoot handheld. Now, I will also take some shots with a tripod. With all that said, let's go ahead, jump right in, and have some fun.
Leaving on a midnight train, take me far away from here. Full moon is shining, headlight, I'm driving, yeah. Take me far away from here. Right now, 'cause I won't wait till I find my way back home. Right now, baby. Right now, baby. Right now, baby. Right now, baby. Catch you from the garden, better say prayer. This ain't no place of mercy, safety. Finally, take me far away from me. 'Cause all our lives we play this game, dance on through, burning flame. I'm burning, baby. I'm burning, baby. I'm burning, baby. Burning, baby. Shadows on the wall, hanging by a crawling on my knees.
I enjoyed spending the afternoon and evening outside, shooting a bunch of photos and meeting some interesting people and taking some video. It's nice to be back inside though, because when that sun went down, it sure did get cold. So what are my thoughts on this camera? Well, I do like the articulating screen right here. It is very responsive to touch and it works well when you're shooting video. However, I'm not a big fan of using the live view for taking photos. And it's simply because I prefer to have more exact focal points when shooting photos. Now when you're doing video, it doesn't need to be that precise, so that's okay. Now I do like this when you can tilt this down, so if you're in a crowd, you can hold your camera up high to get those shots. And if you need to take one that's down low, you can obviously angle it the other way. But my preference would probably be to get on the ground, unless that ground is saturated or it's muddy and it's just not something I want to get into. So overall though, this screen is really nice and I do like it. Now, as of today, this camera with the lens, this is an 18-55 VR, is selling for about $750 on Amazon. I'm going to post a link below as to where you can get this. Now, in comparison, the Nikon D3400 with the kit lens of 18-55 is selling for around $500. So there's a difference of $250 roughly. So you might ask the question, is it worthy of upgrading? Well, if you have some extra money in your budget and you really like the idea of having this touch screen that rotates, because keep in mind, you can rotate it forward, so if you want to do some self-vlogging, you could definitely do that. And if you really want the time-lapse feature, which I really enjoy, it's a big benefit to have the camera generate that video that results from time-lapse. Then you may want to go for this camera. But other than that, don't feel like you're sacrificing quality to take the Nikon D3400 or a lesser camera. They share the exact same sensor in the same 24 megapixel resolution. Now, all of these images, I did post-process in Lightroom to some extent. I took most of these in RAW, but I also took some in JPEG just because I wanted to see how they would turn out, and they turned out great, so really no issues there. I hope this video helped you out. If it did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. It's called Real World. More often than not, I post videos about photography and technology, but you never know. So until the next video, take care of yourself and be safe.